Welcome to Michigan's WW1 Centennial News Report for February 2018. War and Speech, a WW1 exhibition at the Michigan State University Museum. I'm your host, Dennis Skupinski. The State Report for February 2018. On February 2nd, Michigan's WW1 Centennial Commission met for the second time at the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs building in Lansing, Michigan. The order of the day was subcommittees. The following subcommittees were formed: an Educational Subcommittee, Veterans Affairs and Daughters of American Revolution Subcommittee, Museums and Libraries Subcommittee, Homefront Subcommittee, Overseas Subcommittee, and also Government Subcommittee. Also discussed was on August 4th and 5th, there will be a major WW1 Centennial vet at Michigan's Military Heritage Museum in Grass Lake, Michigan. Also during the meeting, Susan Menengay from the Pritzker Military Museum and Library called in. She's a project manager for the WW1 Centennial project in the Midwest region. She outlined several activities that are going on in the Midwest region and also what is going on nationally for the WW1 Centennial. Finally, I'd like to give you a sneak preview of a project that Matt Van Acker from Save the Flags is working on. It features Michigan's WW1 battle flags. All of these flags right now are in a state of preservation. More information about the poster and Save the Flags will be coming up in the future. Just a reminder to check the latest events for Michigan's WW1 Centennial. Please go to ww1cc.org/Michigan. One century ago, February 1918, on February 5th, HX-20, a convoy from Halifax, Nova Scotia, was making its way towards England. At 5:40 p.m., 2 torpedoes were fired by UB-77 under the command of Lieutenant Commander Wilhelm Meyer. The first of which missed, the second torpedo scored a direct hit. By 7 p.m., ship's lifeboats were launched. Approximately 1,350 men remained on board. The convoy's escorting destroyers assisted in removing these, but were hampered by a continuing presence of UB-77 in the area. The Tuscania finally sank at 10 p.m., over 4 hours after being struck. 230 people were lost. The Tuscania was the first ship carrying American troops to be sunk, and public opinion in the United States regarded its loss as an outrage. In 1920, the Red Cross erected a monument on the Isle of Islay, where the victims had been buried before they were transferred to the American War Cemetery at Brookwood, England, or to the United States. On February 8, 1918, the newspaper Stars and Stripes began publication. It was an 8-page weekly newspaper that ran from February 8, 1918 until June 13, 1919. It was published in France for the American Expeditionary Force over there. It relied on improvisational efforts of its staff to get it printed and distributed to U.S. troops. On February 9, 1918, the War Department approved the U.S. Army Chaplain School. It was created by Chaplain Major Aldridge A. Pruden and was created out of the need to adequately train chaplains to staff the large fighting force that the United States was creating in 1917 for service in the World War. Chaplain Pruden's plan for the first session of the chaplain school commenced on March 3, 1918 at Fort Monroe, Virginia. Chaplain Pruden was the first commandant of the school and established a 5-week curriculum which included courses in international and military law, first aid, drill, and the rules of land warfare. On February 10, 1918, in Finland, General Karl Mannerheim gathers an army known as the White Guard to mount a counter-revolution against the Bolshevik Red Guard. This was one of the first clashes of the Russian Civil War. On February 11, 1918, President Woodrow Wilson makes another speech before Congress and announces the 4 principles. These are supplements to his 14 points. They include such principles as freedom of navigation and the end to secret diplomacy. On February 21, 1918, British General Edmund Allenby captured the city of Jericho just to the east of Jerusalem. The attack was led by the Australian Light Horse and the New Zealand Mounted Rifle Brigades. On February 26, 1918, at 4 a.m., the British hospital ship Glenard Castle was hit by a torpedo in No. 3 hold. The blast destroyed most of the lifeboats, while the subsequent pitch of the vessel hindered attempts to launch the remaining boats. In the 8 minutes that it took the ship to sink, only 7 other lifeboats were launched. Rough seas and inexperienced rowers swamped most of the boats. Only 32 survivors were reported. A total of 162 people were killed. Evidence was found suggesting that the submarine may have shot initial survivors of the sinking in an effort to cover up the sinking of the hospital ship Glenard Castle. The body of a junior officer of the ship was recovered from the water close to the position of the sinking. It was marked by 2 gunshot wounds, one in the neck and one to the thigh. The body also had a life vest on it, indicating that it was shot while in the water. At the Michigan State University Museum main gallery, there is a World War I Centennial exhibit called War and Speech: Propaganda, Patriotism, and Dissent in the Great War. This exhibit explores, through the Michigan State University's museum's extensive World War I poster and militaria collection, the new ways in which Americans understood civic duty and used civic speech. At the same time, women, African Americans, Native Americans, and immigrants, not all of whom were full participants in the American body politic, were encouraged to enlist in the cause. Propaganda posters produced by the United States government, by commercial lithographers, and the average citizens created a new modern way of signifying patriotism and the American people. War and Speech provides a window to that moment, framing Americans' ideas about nation and citizenship in this critical, historic era. The U.S. Army Nursing Corps display is one of the jewels of the exhibition. It features U.S. Army nurse Letta M. Carl. She was with Base Hospital 64, and a picture was taken of them in New York before departing for France in 1918. They have her nurse uniform on display along with her medals. There are very few U.S. Army Nursing Corps uniforms on display, so please don't miss out on this one. Dissent and censorship. During the First World War, the United States government fought for the minds of the American citizen. One way was the establishment of espionage and sedition laws. The second was the formation of the Committee on Public Information, headed by newspaper reporter George M. Creel. The espionage and sedition laws gave the government wide sweeping powers to shut down newspapers and limit free speech, while the Committee on Public Information fought for the minds of the American citizen through propaganda posters and other patriotic endeavors. During the war, the American Library Association formed the War Library Service, which built libraries and supplied reading material for the soldiers at home and overseas, but only certain types of material. The books and publications had to be anti-German and support the war effort. The melting pot. The United States is made up of citizens of various religions and nationalities. Some of these nationalities were now at war with the United States. How would these people react? Fighting for the mind of the American population was the reason why President Wilson formed the Committee on Public Information. Its job was to convince the people living in the United States that they were Americans first, above all else, and unite them behind the war effort. The posters during this period were the best examples of the Committee on Public Information's reach. They went to all segments of the population and printed in many different languages, trying to convince these people that just came over here from the old country that they were now Americans. The enemy. The Committee on Public Information, in order to gain support of the American population, had to show that the Germans were subhuman. The Hun. The Hun was a nomadic barbarian who settled in Germany and did not respect civilized world. These posters try to create that image in the minds of the American public. Kitchen patriotism is another way to unite the American population. Not everybody can go to France and fight the Hun. Some people have to stay behind, such as women and children. But you can still fight the Hun in the kitchen. These posters by the Committee on Public Information demonstrate the many ways that Americans could get behind the war effort.
They were summoned from the hillside, they were called in from the glen, and the country found them ready at the stirring call for men. Let no tears add to their hardships as the soldiers pass along, and although your heart is breaking, make it sing this cheery song. Keep the home fires burning while your hearts are yearning. Though your lads are far away, they dream of home. There's a silver lining through the dark cloud shining. Turn the dark cloud inside out till the boys come home. Overseas there came a pleading, help a nation in distress, and we gave our glorious laddies honor bade us do no less. For no garrant son of freedom to a tyrant's yoke should bend, and a noble heart must answer to the sacred call of friend.
And they thought we couldn't fight. This part of the exhibition displays WW1 militaria brought back by Michigan agricultural students.
Get your gun, get your gun. Take it on the run, on the run, on the run. Hear them calling you and me. Everyone for liberty. Hurry right away, no delay, start today.